In studio by Mr. Brad Brewer, who co-founded the Arnold Palmer Golf Academy, co-authored a book as well. Brad, I know this is a tough day for you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, guys. Thanks very much.
You know, your experiences with him, he could appear to be a very intimidating person. The first time you were around him, were you intimidated?
I think I shaked a little bit in my boots. Yes, absolutely. He had that kind of aura and charisma that, and certainly he was that man's man, you know. So yeah, I was very intimidated at first, but it just had this aura around him, and we've all heard the accolades from many. Certainly, he did have this special aura that made him very intimidating for sure.
What was it about Mr. Palmer's golf game at large and his swing in particular that drew you two together?
Well, I think, you know, when I was younger, I actually read his book, Go for Broke. And it was when I was in the hospital with a broken arm. I think one of my friends thought it was funny. But I read it, and I had really resonated with his approach to playing the game. And then shortly after college, I had an opportunity to work for his company and got to know him personally. And getting to know him and understanding how he really did things. It wasn't just in the book, it was the way he lived his life on a daily basis. It was impressive. It really was impressive to see him have that go for broke mentality.
The greats of the game, a lot of them, and I know you heard this a lot today, Matt, as well, is reflected on his grip and how he might have put his hands on a golf club the prettiest that anybody's ever seen. You agree with that?
I would agree. First off, he had big hands, very strong, powerful hands, but they were on the club in a very specific way. He felt that, you know, as far as fundamentals are concerned, that was the number one. You start with grip, and don't go anywhere else until you have proper grip. And so when we were teaching the method, that was the starting point, where a lot of pros, quite frankly, will skip over grip because they're afraid to move the hands around, because the hands are where all of our spatial perception comes from, right? So when you people make a little tweak from here to here, it feels like someone hit you on the head with a hammer, you know? And so, but he believed that you're gonna have certain aspects of your swing that can't be really done correctly if you don't get the fundamental of the grip correct. So his hands were perfect on there, and we try to do the same thing with all of our students.
I remember Mr. Palmer saying one time that his swing thought, his swing key, was to tuck his right pocket, to tuck his right hip. What did he mean by that?
Well, he wanted to keep a really steady head. That was his mentality. He wanted to keep a steady center and rotate. And so his tendency was to drag the club off the ball, which would cause him to kind of move a little bit to the outside. So in his first move back, if he felt like his right hip would pivot behind him, he was able to stay a little more centered and then rotate completely with his hip and shoulder turn, which he had a huge hip and shoulder turn, one of the reasons why he could hit it so far.
You know, Brad, one of the things when people see the vintage Arnold Palmer footage is that his swing was unorthodox, and in particular, his finish. Knowing his personality, do you think that he would have been susceptible to being over-engineered by today's instructors?
We talked about that a lot. And in fact, when the first class we had at Bay Hill, I had a broom out by my bag. And he drives by and he goes, "What did my grounds crew clean up for you?" And he was giving me a hard time about a broom, you know, let alone if I had cameras out there and everything else. He says, "Just teach them how to grip and hit it hard. Go find it." And, you know, so he was very simple in his approach to playing the game, but very in depth as far as an understanding of strategically how to play the game. Really, really good at that. And I think less is more often. You know, even myself as a teacher, I have great technology. It gives great feedback, and I can overdo it sometimes with somebody, and I always remember what Mr. Palmer taught me and bring them back to those simple fundamentals and keep it as simple as I possibly can.
Brad is the proprietor now of the Brad Brewer Golf Academy, and when you got started with Mr. Palmer, we talked about the grip, we talked about some of his philosophies in terms of how to coach. What was the actual philosophy of the swing itself in terms of how you would impart the best golf swing for your pupils?
Well, his fundamentals were 5. Grip, address, one-piece takeaway, steady head, acceleration. You master those fundamentals and you too can play great golf. I said it many times and I got it down. And to this day, I will often lose myself in the abyss as an instructor, learning all these great theories and ways of doing things. But often I come back to those simple fundamentals. And when I do is when I have the best success with my students and also with my own game. So yeah, grip, address, one-piece takeaway, steady head, acceleration. And I used to argue with them all the time, well, you know, we need a little bit more from the concept of just acceleration. What's accelerating? Well, everything, through to the target, you know, and he had a very simple, well, what goes first? We'd have these conversations and he'd just kind of look at me like I had 3 eyes, you know, get the golf club to the ball, you know, accelerate through. And so with that sort of simplistic approach and a concept, you think about it. When we typically make mistakes on the golf course, 9 times out of 10 it's because we're not accelerating the club. We're fearful of accelerating, so therefore we slow down. And then we have path and face issues as a result of that. And so the concept of keeping your head still so that you can accelerate through allows you to have face and path control coming through the strike.
We just listened to Sam Saunders, his grandson, who he has spent countless hours with on the range at Bay Hill. Give us some insight into what it was that he would try to impart on Sam. Was it those principles you're talking about?
Well, I'll start off by saying I was helping Sam one afternoon. His father asked me to kind of give him a little tip, and Arnold comes up and he puts that big hand on me. He goes, listen, I don't mind you help him out, but just remember he has one coach, and that's me. Yes, sir, Mr. Palmer. But you know, I can't really speak as far as what they have been working on as of recently, but you know, back when Sam was maturing as a player, it was the basics. It was the basic fundamentals. He worked really hard on trying to get him to stay centered and accelerate hard. And he wanted him to accelerate as hard as he could without losing his balance. That was the big thing. And as a result, he created a beast. I mean, this young man could drive it over the trees on 10 and almost knock it on the green. And that's quite the feat.
One of the things that's interesting in the stories that we hear about Arnold Palmer was that here the world of golf lost Arnold Palmer at 87 years old, but he never lost his desire to get better at the game of golf. I guess the first question I have for you, Brad, is, was that true? Behind the veil, behind the curtain, was he always searching for something more? And what was Arnold Palmer working on in his latter years?
We're on the driving range one day, and an old golf writer comes up, and I'm actually giving him a tip before he's going out to play. And we were just looking at basics. His tendency was to stretch for it with his driver. So he'd get away from himself, and he started having some balance issues. So it was just trying to kind of keep him a little bit more underneath himself with his arms. And so Larry comes up and says, what, you're still learning? He goes, I'm always learning. He says, I'm just not that surprised that much anymore. And it was a great comeback to kind of a jab, right? And he was very good at doing that, by the way. And yeah, it was always the little things, but you're absolutely correct in the sense that every day this man would get up and try to get better. He had a mindset like that. In fact, I don't know if you were at his 80th birthday party with the hospital group, and he gets up on stage and he says, okay, when I die, you have to promise me that you're going to try harder to do better. He says, we've done great work here, but we need to do better. So promise me when I'm gone, you must try harder to do better. And he said it 2 or 3 times, and he was just, you know, that adamant Arnold Palmer. But that's the way he lived his life. Every day he would get up and he would try harder to do better. And this is how success happens with an individual like that.
It's fascinating stuff. I got to ask you, and I mean this with all due respect, why you? What was it about you and Arnold Palmer that drew you two together?
I have no idea. I ask that all the time. And I don't want you to make me start crying, but it's, I was very blessed. It was just a great blessing and opportunity, and maybe I was just dumb enough to do what Ed C. told me. He said, just try not to think and keep up. And that's what I tried to do every single day with them, and it was quite a journey.
Well, we know you cherish your relationship with the man. Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys. It was
Brad
quite
Brewer.
an honor.
All right. Well, we know that we've got the celebration